Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where it's about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about my adventures with Superman, Season 1, Episode 8. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So, interesting development for Clark in this episode is that he awakens his super hearing, which it is such a complicated and, a lot of his powers end up being very overwhelming, especially when he can't control them. Granted, he hasn't gotten the X-ray vision yet, which we know that can be very disorientating, but also the super hearing, because it ends up being that thing of, and I think this also plays into a larger theme of, Superman, because I know, it's been done in Superman stories. I even know the Supergirl storyline kind of in the TV show touched on this, was the whole aspect of, should you really just be doing your regular thing as Clark Kent or Kara Danvers if you've got these superpowers? Why aren't you out there saving people all the time? It's stressful when you can literally hear everything in the city, people crying out. And obviously that goes even further when Clark's abilities develop to the point he could literally hear around the world. So it is this thing of, obviously he hears all these people in danger, and that shows who he is. Hey, I want to do good. I want to help people. And it's a lot overwhelming. Even when Jimmy shows up, it's whoa, he sees all the energy drinks and the coffee. It's yeah, Clark has been up for days saving people. And for some people, that still will never be enough of regardless, because he will always be seen as a threat because of your power. It's yeah, you're fine one day, but it's who's to say you won't just turn on us? But that's just kind of that cynical element of any human, because we see that people are capable of we give us too much power. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. Once again, but that's what makes Superman so special. As Superman is supposed to be the example that we can never achieve. To be yes, he probably has faltered and he has his flaws, but he can be rise above it. The benefit of not being human, that he can learn from the humans' mistakes. He can learn about the good that humans are and the bad that they are, and still not succumb to that despite that. Because maybe it's just luckily being raised by the parents he was raised by, or maybe it is just purely being not human, that Kryptonian side of himself being raised human kind of gives him a different perspective. And and especially in a time when Clark, especially in this show where Clark is being demonized for being what he is, even though he doesn't know who he is. He barely scratched the surface. I wouldn't even say I wouldn't even call it barely scratching. He took the smallest steps into learning who he was in episode 2, but he hasn't really gone back to really, at least on screen, we haven't seen him really learn much more about himself. That's the only interaction with Krypton he's really had. So it is that thing of people demonize him for being one thing, but even he doesn't know who he is. But he knows who he is enough in his values and his beliefs of, I want to do the right thing. And so that is kind of sad. And especially at a time too where Lois she wants to believe in Clark, but it is that thing of, she's been kind of shown that she can be cynical as well. Because some people were whoa, why would you assume the worst? Obviously, some Clarks are some Supermen are bad, but yeah, that shows that some Supermen are good. But for her, it's she doesn't know those. It's a double-edged sword of, yes, you don't know what made those Supermen break bad, but that's also the problem. I don't know what made them turn evil. What if something could happen inside of Clark and he could flip a switch? Because at the end of the day, it's yeah, we got this springtime romance. We're super head over heels for each other. But once again, they don't know anything about each other. Clark doesn't know anything about himself. And it's how do you, and even his mom had brought up, what if you find out about, what if you go into this ship and you change? That was a concern of hers. She doesn't want to lose her son. And Lois is kind of in that same predicament where it's I don't want to lose Clark. But if these are other universes, once again, there's extenuating circumstances, but that's the largest X factor to it that she doesn't know. So for her, it is a thing of, I'm scared that I now know there's a possibility that that's in Clark, but it's just, she's driven by fear, which I'm not going to put that 100% on her, because it's also human nature to be driven by fear. We let our fears control us time and time again. And that's why Clark's in the crosshairs of the General and Task Force X he is, because they're driven by fear. They, I think, had their motivations why they were driven by fear, but I think it's meant to be this interesting parallel of Lois's fears in conjunction with the General. Once again, I'm still sticking with that being her dad. So I think that's going to be that interesting parallel. It makes me wonder, was there something when she was younger she might not remember because maybe she blocked it out, trauma that she blocked out, but her dad remembers, because we've gotten flashes of a younger general experiencing something, and I think it was the day that Clark crash landed here on Earth, and all this technology that Task Force X has that was stolen by some of the rogues we've gotten over the course of this show. I think that was technology, Kryptonian technology, and I think he associates all the bad technology with Clark. But once again, it's like Clark's only been active as Superman super recently, so why do you assume the worst in him? Because I think he had to run it, once again, my thought initially, I talked about this maybe last episode, maybe the episode before last, I thought we were going more in the direction of I was like, is this set up for because of the inner gang situation, but obviously inner gang is working differently in this universe like it was in Superman and Lois. But I was thinking are they setting up a apocalypse situation? Is this going to be set up for Darkseid? But my theory last episode or whatever made me go since we're going on a more technological side of things, it's this set up for Brainiac. So, all this stuff being attributed this distrust that the general has for Superman, maybe it's more so should be aimed at Brainiac, and maybe he just isn't aware that Brainiac's a thing, or we don't have enough info to really determine what in the past makes him think this is all on Clark. Even though you've never met him, he's only been he's had his outing as Superman for a little while, and even then you've had your issues with him. You just assume the worst. I think maybe it stems from him being a military man, kind of seeing the worst of humanity, and it's here you are. I've seen men with a fraction of your power break bad and be evil. Someone of your magnitude, of course you're going to be bad, So kind of just once again assuming the worst. But I was paralleling this also with Lois. I'm sorry I'm going on this whole diatribe, but it's when we first got introduced to Lois and what she thought the worst of Superman. I mean, obviously he saved them and everything, but the moment Clark was when their interview in episode 3, it's who are you and where are you from? And what was her first assumption? He's a liar. And Clark's he just wants to use his power because she's yeah, that's if you were Superman. If you had powers, Clark, sure. So it's that complicated thing of without Clark's identity associated with Superman, she didn't have the best opinion of him, which I think is apple didn't fall too far from the tree in that regard. But the only reason why she has a more positive image of Superman is because she now knows Clark is, and she likes Clark and thinks he's a good guy. But even that got rocky when she found out, oh, you lied to me. So that's where I think, once again, a lot of those issues I think stem from her dad, because her dad was a liar. So it's kind of that super extreme thing of she hates anyone that lies, it all stems from her complicated relationship with her dad. So either way, I'm sorry I went on that massive tangent, but I think it is all relevant and important to the developments of kind of where the story is going. Obviously, Jimmy's kind of excited at the beginning by Clark doing the superhero thing because it's making his following go up, and it's holy crap, I got 1 million. And later on, I got 2 million followers. Keep doing your thing, Clark. But Clark is running himself ragged, trying to help save the day, but he's also trying to find the general because he's this guy is hunting me. He's going to hurt a lot of people. He already kidnapped everyone that stole any of this technology. I know he's out here in the city. Oh, they're looking for someone, and then the person they're looking for is Kyle or Mist. And I was right. When we saw the criminals at the beginning, in the opening of the episode, Kyle wasn't there. It turns out he slipped away. I do love that twist though. They set us up because Kyle wasn't amongst them in the beginning. So we as the audience buy his story that he got away and he wants to save his sister and his friend and everyone else. But it's no, we find that we saw at the very end of the episode, he pulled down his jacket a little. He has a collar around his neck too. It was all a ploy. They try to lure him in because they're probably oh, we'll lure Superman in because he wants to keep up this facade of oh, he's trying to do good, but I see through his BS. I'm sure that's the thought process, but it's you knew this trap would lure him in. It had to have gone the way he thought it would. He had to oh, Superman wants to keep up this image enough. It's right. And obviously, sadly, in Clark's attempt to try and do right, he's overwhelmed by this power that he has, that he's trying to get better. He's only had it for not even a full. Well, he's had it for a couple of days at this point in time, but he's pushing it because he's keeping it active so he can save the day. He hasn't really focused and fine-tuned it. He does moments throughout the episode so he can find out where Mist is at one point in time and trying to save the day. So like he does eventually hone in on it, but it's still the thing of he's pushing himself so hard with it. So he hasn't really like 100% fine-tuned it all the way through, and because of that, he's overwhelming his senses. And he tried to save Miss, who was about to get hit by a truck, but to everyone else, it looks like, oh, like you just got hit, like you caused a whole bunch of damage, you could have hurt people, and yeah, the people turn on him so quickly, even though he'd been doing nothing but good. Any slip up, because it's like you're too powerful to slip up. I go back to it every time. That episode of Superman and Lois, I will not shut up about it because I legitimately think it's my favorite like episode maybe, but it's also like it's such a beautiful conversation about the struggles of being Superman that every time I'm out there using my powers, I'm being tested. That trust that people have for me is being tested. Clark is so new and fresh at all of this, whereas even that Clark, it's like I've been doing this for decades, and every time I'm out there is being that trust that people have in me, because people can be scared of me and they have the right to be scared of me, but I want to prove to them they don't have to be. Clark wanted to do that. He told the Brain about that, of like, right, I'm going to stick it out with the people I love by my side, that I'm going to find out a way so that just because I'm not normal, that I can find a world and I can find this place here in this world, show them that it's okay, that I can be there, I can be trusted, that I can find a place here. And and especially with all the stuff Mixie was saying to him last episode, oh, you'll never be normal, you'll never fit in, you'll always be the odd person out. Especially later on when Lois tells him, hey, why don't you like not worry about the general right now, just be normal. He's like, oh, normal. And they're like, that's a sore spot for him, because all Clark has ever wanted to be was normal. He's always done, that's always been a part of that character. That's what Clark Kent is. It's meant to be him like being a little more meekish, him being clumsy, him not standing out, because he wants to be normal. He wants to be accepted. He doesn't want to be seen as different and as a freak. Especially hearing that from Lois, who her and Jimmy made a point 2 episodes ago of, we accept you for you being different, because your differences don't change who you are at your core. And I think that kind of got lost in some of Lois's fear about what she saw the other versions of Clark or Superman, And speaking of Lois, I think it's an interesting parallel that she has to kind of face this episode when she gets introduced to Vicky, which is like, hey, because we saw a poster of Vicky on her wall, like I said, like Vicky Vale. It was kind of in the background, so it wasn't like well detailed, but you could still make it out. In like the first episode, like in her room, there's a poster of like Vicky on it, and it was just kind of like, it wasn't a detailed picture, it was a background picture, and you just saw her name. And so Perry brought her here because he's hoping to basically hijack her from the Gotham Gazette, because she's going to do a report, and it turns out it's on Superman, viewing Superman in a bad light. Because once again, we don't know like the full continuity of this universe of it. I brought it up previously. It's just like Superman and Lois, where Superman's the only superhero, period. Not just powered person, but superhero. Because he could be like, there could be other superheroes in this universe, they just might not be powered people. There might be like a Batman or a Green Arrow. Because she did reference that she helped, like Lois was like, oh, she did an article on the Queen heritage scandal, which I'm assuming when I hear Queen, only first person comes to my mind is Oliver Queen. So I'm wondering, like, was there an issue with his family inheritance or something? Because I think Arrow went its own route with it, but I think the whole I think Arrow went a different route with it. I think the whole getting lost thing is part of Oliver's story in some storylines. I don't know if it's the full 5-year thing, but I think there are points where he goes off on an island on his own to train. I don't think it's the whole Lian Yu situation like it is in Arrow. But that's why I was wondering, like, oh, is that what the inheritance scandal was? Like, or it could just be like, oh, someone else, like, tried to take it. Not less, I don't know if he has siblings in the comics like he does in Arrow. In Arrow, obviously, he has 2 half-sisters, but I don't know if that's, like, traditional of him having any siblings. Like, so that's why I was wondering, could it be, like, an inheritance? Like, is that what the scandal was, or what? But also, she apparently helped write an article that took down the Falcones, so it's like... And it sounded like she said plurals, so I'm assuming that might, because I know, at least in the TV show, I know he has a daughter, traditionally Sophia, but I know in Gotham he had a son and daughter. I don't know if that's always the case or not. So I don't know if it's like, oh, the whole family got taken down, or is it just kind of like the Falcone gang in general is what she was kind of referencing. So, but Vicky's an established reporter, which I think that's kind of interesting, making it so that they're not full on colleagues because Lois isn't a reporter yet. She's still an intern in his universe. But I wonder, I'm assuming they're always typically around the same age, and they are like colleagues, professional colleagues, yet rivals. And I don't know what Lois's relationship is like with the other journalists of the DC universe typically. Because I was like, obviously, she never really interacted with any, like, at least live action wise. I mean, that I can remember. Because I've been seeing, like, because I'm trying to, well, because I want to know Kat and Lois have their, but they also worked under both worked under the Daily Planet. But then eventually, Kat went off and started her own thing, Catco. At least that's the continuity of, like, Supergirl, like, of the Arrowverse. So I don't know if that's typical of all of Kat Grant's storylines. If that's always her case of like, oh, I leave the Daily Planet to go do my own thing. I'm so sorry I'm going on these massive tangents, but where this started was me talking about Lois comparing her to Vicky, because both of them are adamant about getting the story. And Lois is, like, we've seen who Lois is, that she's dogged about it. She's ready to do whatever it takes to get the story. The difference this time is the person she cares about is being demonized in a certain way that it's like, oh, because it is the thing of like, journalism is supposed to be unbiased, but Vicky already has her narrative set of, oh, the danger of Superman. Like, she already had, and it's like, as a journalist, you're not supposed to, I mean, journalism is supposed to be super unbiased. It's supposed to just be the facts. So while Jimmy and Lois are painting a very positive narrative about Superman, Vicky's quick to like try and drudge up all the skeletons in his closet. Went to Alex, the dude who worked for Ivo, who's talking about, oh, look at all the Superman do. I'm like, why are we completely omitting Ivo is the one who did all that? Like, why is Vicky actively like not, like, they were also saying like, oh, they were like, oh, he's kind of biased in this. Like, home dude was letting Ivo do the terrible stuff that he was doing. Like, Alex was an accomplice in that, but I guess it's like, I don't know, like, because that's the only time we saw him. It's like when Lois knocked him out to shut off like the barrier around the room. It's like Superman helped save the day. Like, that's super unfair and that's super biased because she's calling out their bias. But it's kind of like, right, you kind of have to. Because even saying Perry isn't one of those people who's willing to do whatever, like, write whatever art, like, she seems like she's willing to do whatever it takes to get ahead, and asking Lois, is she like that? Which Lois was. She was adamant about the story in the beginning, but now that she knows more about Superman, now that she knows he's Clark, she doesn't like him being raked over the coals like he is, you know? Especially knowing, like, in his heart, he wants to do good. He's trying to do good, but she's also conflicted in her stance on it. Like, the recent events made her kind of question him. Like, Jimmy's kind of steadfast because it never crosses his mind, like, oh, Clark is bad. But sadly for Lois, her thoughts have kind of been polluted. Because now, I think as a journalist, you have to be a little more open-minded with the facts that she's been presented. But once again, I would also argue, even from that file, you never got all the, because you don't know the exact circumstance of these other Supermen. It is a little sad to know that there are not just one, there are a few Supermen that broke bad across the multiverse. But I mean, anyone could break bad, you know, like, but it's like something, I guess arguably all the Loises have been good people. So that probably would skew your view of like, okay, the Loises and the Jimmys have kind of done these incredibly good things across the multiverse. And yet not every Superman. But once again, there's extenuating circumstances. We don't know what made each Superman respectively break bad in their respective universe, what it was. I mean, he might have been like mind controlled in any of those cases, like a Brainiac type of situation, you know, bringing him back up. So it is said that no good deed goes unpunished. When Clark is just trying to do the right thing, he tried to help out Miss by rescuing Siobhan and the others, and that whole thing was a trap, and they all gang up on him. I'm like, okay, all this negative press about Superman, what about this? Well, Vicky's already written her report, and she was using it to kind of boost herself up. It was her way to get a promotion at the Gotham Gazette. She manipulated Perry, and because Perry thought he was poaching her from the Gotham Gazette, hopefully. But it's like, no, she was just using this as a stepping stone to publish an article so that she could become like the new editor-in-chief at the Gotham Gazette. And it's like, man, and Lois, it's also that thing of never meet your heroes in so many regards, because that's what's happening with Clark, of like, oh, he's his hero, and people kind of turning on him, like just one little slip up is enough to make it. When you have your 15 minutes of fame, you rise so high above, and then like all it takes is one situation to get people turning on you. Like, people can be flippant like that, That's that complicated double-edged sword of Superman and that whole conversation of trust again. But also you have Lois meeting her hero, like a fellow journalist that she respects and admires, like, oh, you're this person, and kind of meeting her being like, wow, you actually suck. You're not a good person, at least professionally speaking. Like, this isn't even you. I mean, I think you professionally does speak volumes about who you are on a personal level, but still. But yeah, like every villain he's crossed paths with over the course of the show, Livewire, Deathstroke, Banshee, Heatwave, Ivo, and what was Home Dude's name that's with Siobhan and Mist? Like, he's there too. Like, that's 6 opponent he's going up against, and he's getting his shit rocked, And then even partway through the fight, he puts up even more of a fight because he levels up. He gets stronger and I think faster. And he's able to take most of them down except for Ivo, because his suit absorbs the kinetic energy. So the harder Clark hits him, the stronger he is. And who knows what modifications the government's kind of made to it. So not even willing to listen to him, because once again, it's like, not like even Superman did anything bad in this instance. It's just you're jumping the gun on something of like, has he actually done anything wrong? And it's just kind of like it. I think that could be a larger conversation about the military, where it's just kind of like, yeah, taking someone because you got some intel about someone, and kind of taking them to be tortured and interrogated. Like, that seems like that's what they're going to be doing, and probably going to torture and interrogate him, but probably even threaten to kill him, which is sad too. And I think you see it in Mist's eyes that he kind of felt a little bad, but it's like, right, they're all out for self-preservation. And I think that speaks volumes about the general. I mean, that's also the conversation about Task Force X in general, of your willingness to use some bad people for the greater good because they're expendable. But it's like, yeah, you made all these complaints about they stole this technology, they did bad, but they're going to take all their skills and they're going to be to some use. I doubt they went full Suicide Squad and put bombs in their heads. At least not. No, they definitely didn't, because all they have is the electro collars. I guess that's their way from like getting it too dark, because like the bombs in their head would make it a little too, lot more like, what is more accessible for a younger audience that would push it in a more mature lane if blowing up heads was a possibility in this situation. So I already went into this knowing it was going to be a 2-parter, but I wasn't quite sure where it was going to end and how things were going to play out. So I'm very interested to see what the general reaction from the city is going to be post Superman being grabbed up like that, and how Lois and Jimmy can go about finding him and rescuing him, and what Lois may learn next episode about the people who've captured. I'm sure there were people nearby recording, so the general might have gotten caught on video, so that might be a key piece to all this. We'll ultimately have to wait to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and good